Hello, dear friends, and welcome to this whispered flip through of the Vanity of Small Differences by the artist Grayson Perry. This is a fantastic book if you are interested in the cultural landscape of England as a country. One thing that Grayson Perry as an artist does fantastically well is get to the real heart of communities and subcultures across the rich tapestry of English life. And he works in multimedia, but one thing he is known for are his wonderful tapestries. So even though they may look quite small in this book, when we actually look at his artworks, they come in a fold-out section in the book. In reality, the artworks themselves, of which this cover is taken from a snippet of one, they are these huge tapestries that if you walked into an art gallery would see these enormous tapestries hung up on the wall and be able to drink them in minute detail. He's a fantastic artist if you're not familiar with him. He of course has Grayson's Art Club on Channel 4 in England, in the UK, which is a great program encouraging individuals to get into art and exploring the impact of art again across the cultural landscape of England and Britain. The great thing about this book is that before it goes into the artworks, there is a whole section on research where he has gone into the communities that he's made the tapestries and the cultures that the tapestries are about, and there are lots of photographs that he's taken exploring English life in minute detail. So if you are particularly interested in English life beyond what you see in movies and television, and there is a lot beyond movies and television, it's not all tea for two at 4 p.m. and country estate strolls, Downton Abbey and the like. There is a rich tapestry of life in these fair isles. So I will be making my way to the research section of this book. Let's explore English culture together. So we start first of all with older ladies' front rooms in Sunderland, full of pattern and clutter, and it's the environment that the artist says he grew up in. To the IKEA generation, it looks like sentimental kitsch, unlikely to achieve vintage status. To the owners, each piece evokes a personal memory. There is something in that, I suppose, isn't there, if we look at the kind of chintzy kitsch living rooms of our youth, if we're of a particular age, and how everything's been built up and amassed over time and collected, so that everything, right down to the furniture and the design of the carpet and everything, is a particular taste and snapshot of a time in that individual's life. Whereas in this day and age, quite often it's, I know for me personally, sometimes it can feel like convenience, and we all have so many challenges in our everyday life, financially. So going to IKEA and doing your entire house in flat pack furniture is often understandably one of the most convenient options to go for. I hope that this time capsule of life in our belongings and our furniture doesn't get lost over time. This is Edith Ramsay sitting amongst her treasures. So I think one of the topics of the tapestries is about cage fighting and the people who are associated with it, and who go to it, who visit it and enjoy it. If we look over here, I love the descriptions as well, just how he looks at it almost like a kind of David Attenborough-like character. After ritualized grooming, which can take 2 days, clothes, shopping, spray tanning, waxing, nails, hair and makeup, the night out begins with a pre-lash at home, then on to Jaeger bombs in city centre bars. The base level of glamour in Sunderland on a Friday night would make an upper-class wedding in the Cotswolds look dowdy. These women invest heavily in social display. They do indeed. So Sunderland, if you're not familiar, is in the north of England. It's near Newcastle. So that's the artist, Grayson Perry. He has a transvestite alter ego, and there he is there. It spooked me a little when I noticed that I had dressed Tim Rakewell's mother in the Adoration of the Cage Fighters, which is one of the tapestries we'll see later, and the nurse present at his death, Lamentation, on page 77, in the same Madonna blue dress as I wore on my night out in Sunderland. Such is the unconscious process of creativity. There goes my bookmark, apologies. Pink for girls, camouflage for boys. Males often click their aesthetic choice as function. They love a skeuomorph, a design feature that used to be functional but now is purely decorative. A man puts 2 5-litre turbocharged engines into a Renault Clio, understands this. A pigeon Cree, here where we keep pigeons. A pigeon Cree does not have to look like a temple like the ones above, built by Maurice Surtees and his brother in the 1940s, but it helps when it becomes listed, so to safeguard the local allotments. So it's become such a fixture in the local community that it's become listed, so it means the allotment itself is protected. It's recognised by the government as having historic importance. And this is something many people who live in English towns or villages up and down the country may recognise. The shed aesthetic is an aspect of the working class sublime. Sheds like the one shown above are austere homesteads, male wombs. Oh, and somewhere to keep the tools. Male wombs, what an interesting label to put on it. I suppose when you think about the stereotypical associations with some sheds, it's a place where a man would go to the end of his allotment or garden and incubate. He'd disappear into it for hours at a time as his sanctuary, his safe space to tinker away with tools or his gardening. This here is bingo, a social club with bingo. My evening at Heppy's, the Hepworth and Grandage Social Club, inspired the Agony in the Car Park, which is another work we'll see later, between the bingo and the meat raffle. So there was a meat raffle at the bingo, that's nice. Sean Foster Conley sang a song made famous in the club by his mother. As he sang, a friend of his mother's came to the stage, reached up and tearfully held his hand for the duration of the song. This scene was accompanied by the sight of a fat, tattooed man, naked to the waist, cavorting about the dance floor. It was at once moving and comical, and struck me as a demotic masterpiece. Sounds like a typical night out in England. Here is the view from Jane Newman's show flat on the King Hill estate, and that features an expulsion from number 8 Eden Close later on. The carefully contrived architectural variety of this estate runs from flinted cottages and oast houses to Victorian villas and Georgian terraces. Net curtains are frowned upon, but fake grass is an option for your lawn. Again, something that some people from much larger countries may not be too familiar with is the concept of a new build estate, which pop up all across the country, and highly concentrated, highly curated estates of housing, because there isn't a lot of space as it's a very small country. So whenever you have new build developments, they're often highly concentrated, and sometimes you can find that they look very similar across the country, as a company that has designed it will replicate the model. In the consumer paradise, even eclecticism is prescribed. A pre-scuffed sofa, a feature wall, ironic chandeliers, and a hunting trophy. The now fixed visual language of the gastropub and boutique hotel. Real kitsch is hidden away in a cupboard. Of course, here's the real kitsch. These are teddy bears that we've hidden. Pictured in a perfectly coordinated gilver, patented mix of gold and silver sitting room. Kate Pinnell here describes her taste as shabby chic. All is calm and sleek in neutral tones, with a more vibrant accent colour added. The owner of the kitchen shown opposite told me that the work surfaces are recycled chemistry benches. Well, here they are. But it's interesting, isn't it? You hear shabby chic, but then you look at that and think, well, this is incredibly neat. I mean, I would say, in contrast, my kitchen is definitely shabby chic. Emphasis on the shabby. Here is Grayson again, this time referring to allotments being so fashionable they now warrant a high street concession. Eco-hippies have become classic retro. So yes, the idea of having an allotment and growing your own fruit and veg and being sustainable is somewhat trendy, I suppose, in the circular economy. When it comes to looking to be self-sufficient and be carbon neutral, it is interesting, isn't it, how it feels to make something fashionable is simply a regression to a time before we consumed endlessly and pumped rubbish into the skies. Here's some vintage clutter here. Yes, you can see like the eclectic mix here of colours. Very British, vintage style, retro style. The cafetiere still remains a hint of continental, it retains a hint of continental sophistication. But it's the chalice of the middle classes. And then the penguin mugs. So we've actually got one of these. It's one of the penguin book mugs, a room with a view. And it alludes to the other sacramental of cultural respectability, books. So it's interesting, isn't it, when people come over for a cup of coffee, we serve it in a cafetiere to show that we are fancy and respectable. And we're pouring into mugs that are that denote books to show that we're learned and culturally engaged. This is something that I'm sure, of course, many people are familiar with. When it comes to, you think of England, what does that conjure up? Well, the image of a stately home like Chavanage House in Tapestry. Lovely old van there. Here's Grayson Perry again, in the Painswick churchyard. And again, some quintessentially old England, Alpen Manor in Dursley, home to hoarders of the highest order. And here is a chair in the private apartment of John Berkeley, the man who owns Berkeley Castle and a large chunk of the surrounding Gloucester countryside. I understand that 12th century fortresses are expensive to run, but I'm pretty sure he could afford a new loose cover if he wanted one. He has also a 4-poster bed that has been identified as the piece of furniture in longest continuous use by the same family in the UK. What an accolade. Now so what's very interesting here is when you think of upper class, then you think of very ornate, very fancy, but actually this to me is more of what I associate with true upper class. Hunting imagery is everywhere. Horse and hounds are the default motif of the aristocracy. And it's just, yes, there's a degree of tattiness to it because I don't know what it is. It could be that the aristocracy had acquired their wealth from something that is no longer sustainable. You know, it's not like communities have tithes to a local manor and pay into it. You know, that's the government now. So it's almost as if individuals are living off the heritage of ancient money, and they live in these huge dwellings that are the byproduct of that, but really on a day-to-day basis there isn't really, they don't care too much for the aesthetic of the day-to-day, or necessarily have the income streams to be able to maintain an effective aesthetic. The lavatory is the place to find what anthropologist Kate Fox calls the bragging wall in England. Boasting has to be done surreptitiously. So you don't, in English culture, we don't brag, we don't outwardly talk about success, so instead you hang it up in your toilet. So when people go to the bathroom, when they're looking up from the toilet, they can see all of your achievements and discreetly acknowledge them, and maybe never bring them up, but we all know that you've seen them if you've been to the toilet while you're here. Hang any maps of the estate, degree certificates, portraits of oneself as chairman of the board, gold discs or photos with celebrity friends in the loo. One cannot seem not to be taking oneself too seriously, and at the same time guarantee that every visitor will notice your achievements. Yes, there you go, right? Everybody eventually, if they're coming round for the evening or the day, will have to use your bathroom. What a better place to force them to acknowledge how successful you are. Nothing is allowed to change. Tapestry-lined rooms at Chavanage House remain as they were when Oliver Cromwell came to stay, and the Aga, the stove, has gained a crust. It's almost stuck in a time warp. When I asked John Berkeley if I looked upper class dressed like this, he replied, "You look very smart." That's a no then. Then we're on to his sketchbooks, where he's sketching out his ideas. This is all very interesting, but I think what I want to do here is move from those photos, because you can see, look, how he's putting together the he's sketching out what these tapestries will eventually look like, but this is where we get to the main event, so his artworks. So this first piece of artwork is called The Adoration of Cage Fighters. So to give the idea of scale here, you have to fold it out. But like I mentioned before, so this here, trying to get it all in screen. So this, imagine this, the colour of it, the size of it, the sheer scale of it. This would be probably similar in size to, say, a small billboard hoarding. And this scene is Tim's, so it's following a character called Tim, I think, these tapestries. Tim's great-grandmother's front room, the infant Tim reaches for his mother's smartphone, his rival for her attention. She's dressed up, ready for a night out with her 4 friends who have perhaps already been on the pre-lash. 2 mixed martial arts enthusiasts present icons of tribal identity to the infant. A Sunderland AFC football shirt and a miner's lamp in the manner of early Christian painting. Tim appears a second time in the work, on the stairs as a 4-year-old, facing another evening alone in front of a screen. Although this series of images developed very organically with little consistent method, the religious reference was here from the start. I hear the echo of paintings such as Andrea Mantegna's The Adoration of the Shepherds of 1450. So yes, it does evoke, Tim's mother is like the Madonna. Here, the baby reaching out for the smartphone. The wise men, the mixed martial arts enthusiasts with their tap out attire. It's amazing, right? We then move on to the agony in the car park. What a title. Try my best to handle it properly. The agony in the car park. Again, just imagine, just looking at this and imagining the scale of the image. It's a distant relative of Giovanni Bellini's The Agony in the Garden of 1465. The scene is a hill outside Sunderland. In the distance is the Stadium of Light, which is Sunderland, the football team's stadium. The central figure, Tim's stepfather, a club singer, hints at Matthias Grunwald's Isenheim altarpiece of 1512-16. A naively drawn shipyard crane stands in for the crucifix, with Tim's mother as Mary below it. Once again in the throes of an earthly passion, Tim, in grammar school uniform, blocks his ears, squirming in embarrassment. A computer magazine sticks out of his bag, betraying his early enthusiasm for software. To the left, a younger Tim plays happily with his step-grandfather outside his pigeonry on the allotments. To the right, young men with their customised cars gather in the car park of Heppy's social club. Mrs. T and the call centre manager await a new recruit into the middle class. So you can see from his research the pigeonry here and the car engines and the social club that were mentioned before. The meat market. It's you can really see just how plainly his influences just make their way directly into the work, so they're unapologetically accurate. So we now have Expulsion from number 8, Eden Close. Interesting. Moving between worlds. Tim is at university studying computer science and is going steady with a nice girl from Tunbridge Wells. To the left we see Tim's mother and stepfather, who now live on a private development and own a luxury car. She hoovers the AstroTurf lawn. He returns from a game of golf. There has been an argument, and Tim and his girlfriend are leaving. They pass through a rainbow while Jamie Oliver, the god of social mobility, looks down. They are guilty of a sin. Just like Adam and Eve and Massacio's The Expulsion from the Garden of Eden. To the right, a dinner party is just starting. Tim's girlfriend's parents and fellow guests toast the new arrival. Jamie Oliver, the god of social mobility, that is hilarious. The Annunciation of the Virgin Deal. Tim is relaxing with his family in the kitchen of his large rural second home. His business partner in yellow has just told him he is now an extremely wealthy man, as they have sold their software business to Richard Branson. On the table is a still life demonstrating the cultural beauty of his affluent lifestyle. To the left, his parents-in-law read, and his elder child plays on the rug. To the right, Tim dandles his baby while his wife tweets. This image includes references to 3 different paintings of the Annunciation by Carver Crevet, the vegetables, Matthias Grunwald, his colleague's expression, and Robert Campin, the jug of lilies. The convex mirror and discarded shoes are reminders of that great pictorial display of wealth and status, the Arnolfini portrait by Jan van Eyck. There we have the cafetiere and those bookmarks. Yep, absolutely. The upper class at bay. and their children are grown. They stroll, like Mr. and Mrs. Andrews in Thomas Gainsborough's famous portrait of the landed gentry in 1750, in the grounds of their mansion in the Cotswolds. They are new money. They can never become upper class in their lifetime. In the light of the sunset, they watch the old aristocratic stag, with its tattered tweed hide, being hunted down by the dogs of tax, social change, upkeep, and fuel bills. The old land-owning breed is dying out. Tim has his own problems. As a fat cat, he has attracted the ire of an Occupy-style protest movement to camp outside his house. The protester silhouetted between the stag's antlers refers to paintings of the Vision by St. Hubert, who converted from the leisured life of a nobleman on seeing a vision of a crucifix above the head of a stag. I mean, it's quite a powerful image, isn't it? He must have, from his time with the upper class, just seen how they are worn down and slowly. I mean, I didn't notice that the dogs have social change and tax on them in a upkeep in a very I think that refers back to what I must have been talking about earlier when I talked about upkeep, about how they have these huge houses but they can't possibly maintain them because the manner of which the landed gentry would have received their income is outdated and this no longer exists. Hashtag lamentation. Oh dear. I mean, there's some very English things here you see already, right? Like a copy of Hello magazine. You've got like a retail park, Toys R Us, Home-Based Dreams, Beds, Next, PC World, like a Bab House. This scene is the aftermath of a car accident at an intersection near a retail park. Tim lies dead in the arms of a stranger. His glamorous second wife stands stunned and bloodstained amidst the wreckage of his Ferrari. To the right, paramedics prepare to remove his body. To the left, police and firemen record and clear the crash scene. Onlookers take photos with their camera phones to upload to the internet. His dog lays dead. The contents of his wife's expensive handbag spill out over a copy of Hello magazine that features her and Tim on the cover. At the bottom of Rogier van der Weyden's Lamentation, the painting that inspired this image is a skull. I have substituted it with a smashed smartphone, which refers back to the first tapestry in the series where Tim reaches for his mother's phone. This scene also echoes the final painting of Hogarth's A Rake's Progress, where Tom Rakewell dies naked in the madhouse. There we are, naked and alone, despite all of that wealth. And that concludes the tapestries. So there's some more details here. So I think this is going into more detail, just showing you the up close, so you can actually see some of the stitching work on the tapestries themselves. Just there is so much detail. This is, I'd love to have seen this as an installation, because being able to get up close and personal with all of these tapestries and just make out the individual fibres, I don't think you can convey it in a book. I think just the sheer size and scale. I think if I move on to, I think there is a section here. So there's a little bit about how tapestries are made and the process of creating them. And then, okay, look, so you can see here are 4 women, the people he went on a night out in Sunderland with, and you can see the 4 of them are standing in front of the tapestry of which they're the subject of, but all 4 of them only make up half of it. So again, it gives you an indication of the pure scale of what these tapestries actually look like. Here they are in a huge installation room. I mean, look, you'd be able to walk around this room and just stand in these huge tapestries, learning about the story of Tim Requell and incorporating social mobility and the vanity of small differences in this story about Middle England. Thank you for joining me for this whispered flip through of The Vanity of Small Differences by Grayson Perry. I very much recommend the works of Grayson Perry. They're wonderful and really do celebrate the unsung or hidden elements of English and British culture. He is also great at encouraging anyone to get into art. His wife Philippa Perry is a psychologist as well, and has written some fantastic books, particularly books around parenting, which are great. I look forward to having you join me next time as we read through more exciting works.